All right, thank you. All right, we'd like to welcome everybody out to today's Wednesday, June 21st, Harriman City Planning Commission, regular Planning Commission meeting. Appreciate you all being here. We will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance that will be led to us by Susan Scott. So if you're here, come on up. Yes, please.
We have a flag.
Where's our flag? Oh. Who stole the flag? Can we do it? What do we do here? This is a new one for me.
This conference will
Yeah, maybe you
now
can
be
pull one up
recorded.
on screen. Huh?
I got you.
She's going to pull one up on the screen. I had no idea. That's funny. Never happened. They must have taken it for Harriman Town Days, I bet you.
Okay,
Somewhere.
we're just gonna imagine that flag is right there.
All right. Very good. Oh, look, you got it.
I
There
got
you go.
it.
All right.
All right. There we go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather, for pulling us out of the bind. All right. We do have a full quorum today, and we've also have a couple of alternates for us tonight as well. First off, I'll ask if there are any conflicts of interest with any of the voting members tonight. All right, thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 3.4, which is an approval of the minutes for the April 5th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for April 5th as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Heather and a second by Forrest. Roll call vote on these. We'll go ahead and go down the line. So Preston.
Yes.
Adam.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Daryl. Yes. And Forrest.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to administrative item 4.1. All right, Sheldon has this one for us.
All right, so the first item is a subdivision extension request. It's located here in the center of the city off of 134 and Rose Canyon Road. Here's the lot in question. They have previously received PC approval for this preliminary plat back in June of 2021. There was some conditions tied to that plat, well, tied to the approval of that preliminary plat, which obviously is, we'll move forward again with this extension. Again, per ordinance, they are allowed to do an extension. They can go up to twice the length of the original approval, which is 2 years, so they can go up to 4 years. We're just asking for a 2-year extension at this point. The reason behind this request for the extension is just due to some unforeseen costs for some improvements that have to be done for this before South Valley Sewer will actually sign up on the plat. So the applicant's asking for an extension of time so they can save up for that money. That being said, staff does recommend approval of that subdivision extension request with the following conditions.
Great, makes sense. Any questions?
Nope. Right.
For Sheldon.
Applicants
Okay.
here, if they have any questions,
you.
or if you have any questions for the applicant, they're here.
All right. We will go ahead. If the applicant wants to come forward, provide any additional information, seems pretty straightforward, but that's fine. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any discussion from Planning Commission? Seems pretty straightforward.
I'm ready to make a motion
Okay.
to approve item 4.1 with staff's recommendation.
Okay. We have a motion by Adam
I'll second.
and a second by Jackson. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. We'll start with Forrest.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Adam.
Yes.
And Preston.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you so much for being here. All right, we'll move on to item 4.2.
Good evening, and thank you again. This is a continuation of a commercial development project that the Planning Commission has reviewed previously. As per a prior condition of approval by the Planning Commission, the final building elevations and landscape plan for this project was required to be presented back to the Planning Commission. So this is the general location of this project. This is the subdivision plat that was approved for this area, and we're now looking at pods A, B, C, and D in the top corner of this screen. Again, this is a commercial project. This was a preliminary plan that does show some residential down here in the corner. As you know, this residential project changed over time, but is still planned for that location. This was the amended plan that was approved by the Planning Commission. Again, in the upper left-hand corner, you're still seeing this pads A, B, C, and D. And this is the area that we're looking at tonight. You'll see in this proposal that currently the plan is to, on pad D, to just do parking on that site, which is acceptable and still consistent with the approval of the city. We could potentially see a future pad there, but for right now, the idea is to provide that parking. So staff has reviewed the landscape plan. It's consistent with the other plans that we've been seeing going to the center, as well as the building elevations. I've included all of these, but I'm just going to flow through them quickly. I just wanted to have them in case there was any particular question. But again, these are very consistent. You're seeing just variations on the awnings and the combination of the materials within the center. And then, of course, all the signage is done separately for each of these tenants as they come in. The applicant is here online tonight if you do have any questions for them. We do want to have just a landscape summary table added to their landscape plan. It just makes it easier when we have to do a final inspection. We can go out and just simply count all the plants and the types and everything. And then also, as the developer has been getting specific users within the center, we had recommended as a condition that we just simply update the parking information, the parking plan, to reflect those known and intended uses in Pod 35, just to make sure that we're staying up in complying with the overall conditions of approval. So that was staff's recommendation. I don't know if you have any questions for the applicant tonight.
Maybe one quick question, even for staff, that I have is when they do decide to build a fourth pad there with that building, is there, I guess, they'll still have to come back to us, and so then obviously parking and everything will then,
Right.
because parking will be removed, so when that happens,
Yeah.
that will be a future situation for us to work through. Okay, perfect.
Which at this point in time, given some of the parking demands that we're seeing in our market still, it feels like providing the additional parking is appropriate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Any other questions for Michael? Okay. All right, thank you. All right, the applicant is online. I don't know if there's any additional information that you would like to provide to the Planning Commission, but we'll allow you to do that at this time.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Absolutely, yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That was a great presentation. Just to answer the question on that building D, we do not plan to build it. So that final plan that you're seeing with A, B, and then an increased size building for C, and then additional parking, that's looking like that's going to be our final plan. So we do not plan on building on pad D.
Very good. No, that makes sense. Okay.
Yep. So that building C is now just increasing to 8,600 square feet, no drive-through, and then that additional parking on the left side.
That was the question I had about drive there. Okay, very good. Thank you. Any questions from the Commission? All right, thank you, applicant. Appreciate that. Go ahead and have a discussion if needed, or we can move to a motion. Is there any thoughts or discussion here?
Because we just heard that pad D is going to go away, Mike, do we need anything official that records that?
No, because the lot still exists. And if the developer at any point in time wanted to reconsider and bring back a building D. As was mentioned, we would still need to make sure that it meets the parking requirements of the city. The lot is there, but this is the current site plan for Pad D, and it meets the standards.
Could be something similar that happened on the Smith's parking lot, right? Where
Yeah.
down the road, it could happen, but then they'll have to come back at that time, so. Okay,
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve item 4.2, the review and consideration of the final building and elevations and landscape plan for commercial in Academy Village Pod 35.
I'll second.
all right, we have a motion by Adam and a second by Preston. We'll call for a vote at this time. Preston?
Yes.
Adam?
Yeah.
Jackson?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
And Forrest?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. We'll move on to item 4.3. Is this one yours as well, Michael?
Okay, this is, again, a continuation of a conversation we've had with the Planning Commission previously in a work meeting for additional signage for an emergency room facility here in the Harriman Town Center, just north of 134th South in this general vicinity on this vicinity map. More specifically, you can see that this is a sign location near the CVS Pharmacy on that northeast intersection of Fort Harriman Parkway and 134th. As we've discussed previously, this was in a work meeting. We showed you this conceptual sign plan, and this was certainly not the first iteration. They have been working with staff and with their own team trying to figure out how do we address making sure that the general public is aware of the location of this emergency room facility that is not directly adjacent to 134 South. As we talked about, the Harriman Town Center plan development and the design guidelines do allow for what's called a multi-tenant commercial sign that allows for advertising for properties and users that are deeper within the site. This is really typical, not just for this center, but other projects that we have. We often see what's called a planned center sign that allows for multiple tenants to share a single sign within a project area. And so that is the request from the applicants, is to have the commission review a conditional use application for a commercial multi-tenant sign on this corner. So from the last conversation, there was a concern to have this sign more closely mirror an existing monument sign that's advertising the entrance, the gateway entrance feature into the Harriman Town Center. In response, the applicant has increased the cap size and the overall dimensions of the monument to be consistent with the existing sign on 134th, including picking up this recessed detail that's evident in this screen. They also added a cap to the sign. There was some discussion about moving the language, the text that says Harriman Town Center to the top, which is more consistent with the sign across the street. But in looking at that, the dimensions of the sign is smaller, and so it makes that cap really top heavy, and it just felt awkward. Typically, things that are heavier and larger are going to be nearer the ground. And when you have something that's that large and appears to be heavy, because they're trying to simulate a stone look, it just felt imbalanced. And so I had recommended that they keep the lettering down at the base of the sign. Again, this is a multi-tenant sign, so part of the sign would be static. The name of the hospital group or the emergency room owner and operator, the emergency directional sign itself, and then it's proposed that this would be a changeable copy electronic signboard. And they just threw on Harriman City just as a placeholder, just showing that this would be something that would rotate and change names. Now, obviously, this is a developing corner of the Harriman Town Center. There's been no agreement made with other tenants potentially, but we one of the conditions of approval is that we have an operational agreement that would specify that it will be for multiple tenants within the site, because that's the type of sign that is allowed within the design guidelines for this project. So again, for reference, the applicant provided these images, these renderings. This was really more to show scale, trying to just show the concept of scale within the site, and also the need for have the sign be perpendicular to the street, 134 South, so that both east and west traffic can see the emergency signage. The other sign that's across the street is kind of, has this chamfered angle to the street. And the sign copy, if we were to set the sign at a similar angle, it just wouldn't be legible in both directions, in both east-west traffic. So we've recommended approval subject to these conditions. I was I briefly had discussions with our city attorney, Todd Sheeran, today, and also our assistant city attorney, Matt, and it was recommended that this condition number 2, where it says applicant shall prepare and enter into an operational agreement with Harriman City, we should add some language, something akin to that is acceptable to this city attorney. So we want to make sure that the city attorney has a chance to review the agreement and agree to it. And our only concern is that we want to make sure that the operation of this sign meets the standards, the intent of the Harriman Town Center and its design guidelines, in that it needs to advertise for multiple tenants. And as you can see, one of the conditions is that we would have a report that would be provided to the city on an annual basis. We do this with some of our other sign operators that have a similar type of sign in our city. And that way we can audit and ensure that we're complying with those standards. So with that said, these are the recommended conditions of approval. The applicant is here tonight to be able to answer your questions. I know we discussed this a little bit in the work meeting, but do you have any questions for me at this point in time? Or do you want to hear from the applicant next?
Just the first bullet, recessed design of brick column shall match of the existing one. Does that mean in color and style as well? Because
that was their effort. They wanted to do that.
Because the renderings look a little
Yeah.
different on the brickwork.
Yeah,
but we
and if you
assumed
want to
was
change
the-
that
Yeah,
to if
I just
it's
want to make sure that,
compatible
yeah,
or
shall match the construction
yeah.
detail and color. Or, yeah, maybe something to that effect.
that
Yeah.
the designer from Yesco unfortunately was out of town.
Yeah.
But that was our conversation. That was our intent, that would match as closely as possible to the existing
Great,
material.
that makes sense. And we assumed that was the case. We just wanted to make sure.
You want to clarify that? That's,
Want to clarify.
That's a good
Yep.
catch.
You know what assume means, so. Okay, all right, well, thank you, Michael. Any questions for Michael? All right, we'll let the applicant come forward if there's any additional information. I know a couple of us had a question as to the way this is laid out and the way this is looking. It looks like that the column then should be on the north side, where the renderings that we had on the next slide, if you go down a slide or two, I don't know if somebody can help us with that. Yeah, right there.
This one?
That one. It looks like those are backwards from what the sign was because the
Basically, the
emergency.
question is, where's the column? Is it on-
Yeah, maybe that's the question. Where is the column? Is it on the north side or the south side of the sign? And maybe you don't know.
To me, I would actually flip this.
That's what I'm thinking, it
That's-
should be
That's
flipped.
what I would do, but I think they did this reversed, yes.
Yeah, we were trying to anchor the column out on the street, but obviously the directional sign of the emergency is going the wrong. So we would fix that, but
But that's the question. Is the column on the south side or the north side of the sign?
Yeah, I think it's on the north side.
It's on the north
Should have
side.
been. Yeah, I think that
On
should
the
be
parking
flipped.
lot side.
But
Yeah, yeah. So that image should be
That seems to be more
flipped.
consistent with what we've got on the other side.
Yeah, and to me, I guess that makes more sense from my standpoint
That
because
feels a
of
little
the,
heavy, the way it's.
yeah,
The column should be further down the other road, not 134 in my opinion.
correct.
So-
Yeah, okay. I just want to clarify. Anything else you'd like to present to
No,
us
any
today?
questions you have for me, Planning
Okay.
Commission? Thank you for entertaining this. And I think the emergency room's been open for, 6 months or so, and we're seeing a good pickup in volume, but obviously seconds and minutes count for anybody in an emergency. So obviously having a clear direction of where it is imperative to the health and well-being of the community. So I think this will help.
Thank you. Did we get a name? I'm sorry, did you?
I'm Brian Lyons. I'm the CEO of Lone Peak Hospital.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Okay,
Questions?
All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate you
Thank
being
you,
here.
appreciate it.
All right, any discussion? Maybe we could go to the slide with the recommendations. Yeah, Michael?
Oh,
There you
beat
go.
me to it, Destiny.
So do we need to stipulate that where we want the sign, where we want the column? Do we want to say that in the motion, just since it's confusing and no one knows?
We probably should just stipulate it.
Just asking if everybody, does it matter? I'm not an architect, so I'm going to say, I don't know.
I don't know if it
Matters,
matters.
I'll put it in what I'm thinking.
I got a preference, but I don't know if it matters.
What's your preference?
North?
Okay, that's where I think.
That's mine. I think that's what the applicant would want, so let's just.
I was just going to put that as another recommendation.
Yeah, and then also, sounds like per discussion, item 2 needs to be,
Could
Amended
item 2 just
slightly.
say, applicant shall prepare and enter into an operational agreement with Harriman City that complies with the city attorney's
that is acceptable.
requirements? Is that fair? Okay. Okay, if that's the case, unless anybody has anything.
You know what, I do have one question
Okay,
for
I
the
was gonna say,
applicant.
just wanna make sure.
Can we go back to the last slide? Keep going.
One more?
This one. Okay, so on the screen on the left, it shows the Yesco sign. Is that going to be visible from the street on either side, or will that be in the back facing CVS?
I do not intend to have the YESCO
So
sign on there. That would just be right.
it's the upper right, or upper left. My thoughts are, and I'll go ahead and speak here, unless, with the column on the north side, that would be visible looking north.
No, that'll be street side on 134.
South.
Yeah, you'll see.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you'll
You will
see
see that when you are, when you're on 130, or excuse me, when you're on 56th, I should say. Not 56, whatever that street is, 48th.
The one that enters in by the.
Yeah, the entrance there. Anyhow, when you are
tracking.
looking north, you will see that. Yes. This is how, you will see that when you're looking north.
Heather, maybe you can help
If
me
I may.
understand your concerns.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, because visually, we want it to look really nice and match the other side, right? And I don't know, like, if I drove past that and it was visual from the side, that we're accomplishing what we're intending to do.
Well, my thought is, either way, you're going to see it one way or the other, whether you're driving from the north or driving from the south.
Right, but it's
You're going to
whether,
see that end.
but it's whether you're traveling down the road from the hospital that you see that YESCO.
No, yeah, and you wouldn't.
My personal preference is to have the column on the street side on 134, because it acts as a gateway. And, it more closely would resemble what's on the other side, which has the largest column on 134.
Yeah. Well, my thought is simply to less interference with the word emergency.
Yep. That's my thought as well.
That's why I like it on the left.
Are
Yeah,
you
I-
okay if the applicant makes that choice? Or do you have a strong preference as a body?
I personally like to keep it away from the intersection, the big part of the sign, so that's why I'm saying to the north. But
Sounds like
that's
it's,
totally a safety thing, that's all.
yeah,
I'm
that-
fine either way. My preference would be
Okay.
Yeah.
But
I don't think from an aesthetic standpoint, you're gonna be able to match the other side a whole lot anyway. And just the angle and everything, it's just not gonna,
No, but it's a spatial, when you look at the space, like the space itself of the whole intersection, you're still gonna register that the larger column is closer to the 134 on, on the existing.
it's the
And then
other
with
side
this
of a
one as
gateway.
well.
With
Just
this
for-
being smaller, though, would that make it feel
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna matter.
kind of balanced?
Well, it's gonna feel very off balance if you do the opposite, but I mean, it's
I don't think you're gonna-
it's gonna be there,
Yeah,
whatever they think is gonna work best.
for me, I think the balance is having that on the north side. But again, that's our preference. Everybody, it sounds like we got a few differing opinions here.
Yeah.
maybe we should just have the
obviously, so-
applicant tell us how they want it, and then.
Yeah,
There
and
you go, and we
then
agree.
how the applicant wants it, we can make a motion accordingly, and then you can vote accordingly. Yeah, so,
For your information, it is typical for cities to require some type of who is responsible for owning or maintaining this sign. And so Yesco is just kind of indicating that they will have some kind of placard on this sign, so that when there is like a complaint about maintenance, or if there's like an enforcement issue, and also where this is not directly, on the property that's owned by, or, the emergency facility center is further down the road. So that's just kind of what that's indicating, is that we will have some information there, so that we would say, okay, we know whose sign this is, here's the sign number, we can call Yesco, we've got a problem. So, yeah, for maintenance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
With that, if you go to the motions, I'll make a motion.
Yeah, you can have a seat then. I think we understand your position. Yeah, you prefer on the north side. Thank you.
And I'll just put it in the motion just so it's
Yeah,
clear.
just to clarify it.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve item 4.3 with staff's recommendation with an adjustment. And Destiny, if you can slide it forward so I can see the recommendations, or whoever's doing that.
There we go.
With a alteration to number 2 to say that the applicant shall prepare and enter in an operational agreement with Harriman City that complies with the city attorney's requirements.
Acceptable to the city attorney?
Correct, acceptable to the city attorney. And then a additional, what would that be, 6th item that says that the column will be on the north side.
Could you clarify on number 1, the color of the brick as well?
And that number 1, the recessed design and brick column shall match the color and detail of the existing Harriman City Town Center monument.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion by Adam.
I'll second that.
A second by Heather. We'll do a roll call vote. We'll start with Preston.
Yes.
Adam.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
Forrest.
Yes.
All right, that motion is approved. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 4. Well, before I move on to item 4.4, it is up for a public hearing. I don't know if any of the other ones, none of the other ones were. So before we jump into item 4.4, I would like to read the requirements for the public hearing, since the remainder of our items are on for public hearing. The purpose of public comment is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form that's in the back there and present it to the deputy city recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. This policy also applies to all public hearings. With that, we will move on to item 4.4.
Okay, so this is a consideration for Jordan Schools District preliminary plat and site plan approval. Let's see here. The site here is located just off Mountain View Corridor by the Mountain Ridge development, just north of Mountain Ridge High School. Here's the site. It's about 25 acres. It's currently zoned A143. What they're proposing is, so this is a phase development. So the initial development will be the school area itself, about 100,000 square feet of structure. Obviously some turf areas, recreation, parking, et cetera. The overall development of this particular site will be about 17 acres of the site will be developed out of the 27 acres. Here's the plat they're proposing. So it's a single lot. Again, here in the dark gray areas, you can see the areas they're dedicating for right-of-way improvements. The top there, that's going to be 6400 west, and to your left here will be 138 south. Some proposed elevations of the structure for this flex school here. Again, here's a site plan kind of showing the layout, what they intend to do, and lay out the school site. Again, closer to 138, that's a future phase where they're proposing to do some recreational programmable fields, et cetera. Landscape plan here, and as we've discussed earlier in the work meetings too, there's certain regulations that the district doesn't have to comply with. Therefore, as far as landscaping goes, we don't have a lot of say on landscaping, building placement, architectural design, et cetera. However, on the sections where they're dedicating for the right-of-way, those sections of park strips will have to meet city standards for landscaping requirements, in which they have provided and do meet those standards. Again, a few things to look at. Again, for zoning, the base zone, it does, meet those requirements. Again, public schools are permitted use in the A1 zone. Engineering did, had some concerns, that need to be addressed as well. These are considered minor concerns at this point. So looking at the compliance, the proposal, again, as mentioned previously in the work meeting, 138 South, part of this development, the city is working with the school district now to try to determine what type of improvements they want to see along 138 South. Another issue that needs to be resolved as well is we need to see landscaping for these frontages as well. So for the park strips and et cetera. And then on the plat, they just have to change the Cannon Drive to 4600 West as per the county and city until they can officially come up with a name. I guess the school themselves get together and they name their streets. So once that's done, they can just submit an affidavit with the city and get that changed. That being said, staff does recommend approval with these following conditions. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Any questions for Sheldon?
Just a quick one to confirm. So where they have turf west of the school, we can't specify water-wise landscaping. They have to.
The west of the school along.
No, as they go up that steep hill or up the hill towards
To Mountain View?
to our Mountain View corridor.
Right now, it's
Yeah,
just
go
showing
back
as
one.
turf. Go to the next slide, it shows turf.
Oh, the slide here?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, so Mountain View corridor will be on your left side.
Yep. So they're on the west side where it says turf, and it shows a nice hillside there. We can't.
No, we can't, per the state, we can't regulate any of the landscaping, so,
So they can use our water.
yeah. So
Okay.
obviously, these will all be turf grass, yeah, and unfortunately, we don't have the authority to regulate landscaping for a school project.
Right, that's it for me.
So that's landscaping, building materials, fencing, anything on that site, we can't really regulate, so.
Sheldon, has there been any study that tells us where the students are coming from?
That, I haven't seen any myself. I'm not certain if engineering's maybe already looked at that. The applicant is here. I'm sure they can speak on that behalf.
My thought process now is it appears that most students would more likely come from the Riverton side, the east side, as opposed to the Harriman side west of Mountain View, which creates a dynamic, a safety issue of how do you cross over Mountain View to get to the school.
Yeah, I think that's something we can ask the applicant about when he,
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
sounds like they're here.
crossing
We can
Mountain
hold that question for the applicant.
Sheldon, the stub outs that come off of Wilson Peak and whatever the other street is, go where you were is what I wanted you to. That stub out, what street does that tie into?
View. So
Can you go back to the one that showed the overall current phases that's beyond that?
one here.
One more.
One more.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's Watchman Way that connects into there.
Is it the one that's not labeled on the map?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. And is that a full public road or a private road?
That's a public road.
Okay.
And Monument Peak
All the
is
other
one.
ones are private, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure
Rest are
both were
private.
public. That's what my
Yeah,
question was.
those two are public, yeah. Just like
Couldn't
the
tell how wide
interior
it
roads
was.
are private, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That was all my question was.
Anything else for Sheldon? Okay, thank you. The applicant's here. We'll let him come forward, and please state your name for the record. And I think you heard our question, but if there's any additional information you'd like to provide, but then also answer the comment
Good
that was there.
evening. My name's David Rostrom. I'm the Director of Facility Services for Jordan School District.
Right.
As far as the students, this building will be relieving the current students for Ridgeview Elementary. So the boundaries for Ridgeview is, just because we're so overcrowded on Ridgeview, this will be a 4, 5, and 6. So the current enrollment at Ridgeview, K through 3 will stay at Ridgeview, 4, 5, and 6 grades will move to this new facility.
So the current boundaries of Ridgeview, do they go west of Mountain View? Or maybe you don't know
I
that?
apologize,
They do a little bit? Okay. Small section that does go across.
the
Okay.
majority of it is on
Those
On the
could
east
change.
side of Mountain View.
the east side.
Those could change independent of us, right?
Do you know that area?
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or for the applicant? Okay.
Maybe just some encouragement to use water-wise landscaping towards the future freeway there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a little unique. I kind of hearing the concerns of the amount of grass in that area.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is trying to accommodate for the students, you know, and their play fields. So the field actually to the south of the building, right now, Mountain Ridge High School will utilize that as kind of an extra field for them, because we have so much pressure on our high school fields that they'll actually be able to use that. And so the elementaries will use that portion to the west and the small area to the north. This is kind of a unique building for us, a little bit different design than we've had in the other cities or in your other schools in your city, to where kind of following the growth where it'll start out as a 4, 5, and 6 with the potential as the kids age up that it could turn into a middle school. And so the layout is designed to where we could put on the north end of the building, we could do an auditorium and a kind of a CTE wing, and on the south end we could include a gym. So that's kind of the idea with the flex building is, and that's kind of a unique concept that we're trying on this. So
And that's what's probably shown in the dashed on this figure here. We see,
Kind
at
of
least
that
I
dashed
noticed some
box.
dashed lines on here in those
correct, yeah.
north and south of it. Okay.
That could be for future expansion.
Future expansions, what that's
If the
showing.
need becomes a middle school as the kids start aging in that area.
Cool. That's good. It's forward thinking. Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you for being here
Thank
tonight.
you.
Appreciate it. All right. This is open for, or on for a public hearing. So at this time, I will open up the public hearing for anybody that would like to provide a comment. We didn't receive anything online for this item, right, Wendy? Okay. Okay. Seeing no comments, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
We have a motion by Adam
Second.
and a second by Jackson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, any more discussion from the commission on this item?
It's straightforward in my opinion.
So just to get my head around this, so this is an overflow school for the high school, the existing junior highs,
No, the current elementary that's there.
The elementary on the opposite side of the street.
to house third, fourth, and
Fourth, fifth, and
Fourth,
sixth.
fifth, and
Fourth, fifth, and
sixth would
sixth.
come to this one. Yeah.
It's right here. There, and then this is where they're building.
yeah. With very few students coming from the west side of Mountain View,
Yeah.
if any.
Correct. It sounds like those, and was it you that was mentioning before in the work session, that if they are on that side, there is a bus because of there's an opportunity, and maybe.
Bus Heather was mentioning.
Oh, was Tara was mentioning. Or maybe, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, just briefly. So because of obviously the high speeds and some of the traffic concerns associated with Mountain View Corridor, we don't typically, in fact, we've never allowed a student crossing of Mountain View High School or Mountain View Corridor as part of a safe walk route. So as you look at the Jordan School District elementary boundaries up and down through Harriman, Riverton, and South Jordan, almost all of them, without exception, have a boundary that ends at Mountain View Corridor one way or the other. There is a small section of Ridgeview Elementary that's west of Mountain View Corridor that's in kind of the Juniper Bend area where the new construction homes are, but they have a bus because of distance, and anything that would be west of Mountain View Corridor for an elementary school, typically we can't require, but we would encourage the Jordan School District to provide a safety bus, which they've done in the past, because we wouldn't sign off on any safe walk route that requires elementary school students to traverse Mountain View corridor.
And that's a very good point, that you need to buy off on any of the safe routes to school.
They have to be
There's a-
approved by the city engineering
Yeah.
department and the police department as part of the process. So
Very good.
there's a safety process that goes with putting together any of those. Obviously, there's going to be some significant changes to that safe walk route for Ridgeview when the school comes online next year, and we'll go through that process with them. And the district is a great partner and works very collaboratively with us to make sure we keep the student safety at the foremost.
Fantastic. Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate that.
That was a good point. That was probably the missing issue that I didn't quite get for safety.
Right.
Very good. Did you, he didn't state his name, but you know who he is. So, anyway. Okay. I'll entertain a motion then if there's no more comments.
I'll make a motion for approval with the staff recommendations.
All right, we have a motion by Jackson
I'll second.
and a second by Heather. We'll call for a vote, starting with Forrest.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Adam. Yes. And Preston.
Yes.
Great, that motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our legislative items now at this time. We'll start with item 5.1. Michael, welcome back.
Okay. So this conversation on amending Title 10 to improve code enforcement largely in the city, and then also to clarify some definitions and correct some general text conflicts in the ordinance. But it's been since, I think, January or February since we last talked about this. The RV discussion, which is next, was folded into this draft. And in fact, just for a point of reference, there is some language in this draft proposal still referring to recreational vehicles, but all that's been supplanted by your next agenda item. So we wanted to have another public hearing on this item just because it's been a while. So this is kind of the summary of those items that are proposed. We're addressing some fencing. We've had some conflicts, as you know, in the past with, we prohibit double fencing, but there have been some conditions where we want to make sure that we address incompatible land uses and have a masonry fence. Fence maintenance has been an issue that our code enforcement team has identified, where people can park. There was some conflicting language on how do you measure lot widths and at what point in time, or what distance from the front lot line that's measured. Outdoor lighting, and then we're proposing that we require a business license for internal accessory dwelling units, and that is really in response to the state's requirements to track for moderate income housing reports that we have to submit every year to the city. Anyway, so those are just a number of technical corrections. I'll just go through some images relative to these different topics. We wanted to expand and clarify the definition of weeds. What is a weed? And so our code enforcement team has recommended that we use a definition that is used in other codes that we rely on. So we're proposing to amend that. Again, the double fencing issue, there's good reason why we want to try and avoid those as much as possible. Those often become not only maybe an aesthetic issue, but they can also trap a lot of debris and trash, and then that becomes a fire hazard. Also can impact maybe the life of a fence, if things are piled up against that fence and not maybe accessible for maintenance. We also are defining that a driveway has to lead to a legal parking spot, trying to avoid essentially that you can just turn your front yard into a large parking pad. We want to have those driveway services go to a garage or go to a carport or go to the side yard. More explanation as to where we want to allow parking within the city. Now, this was kind of leading into the RV discussion about do we want to have RVs in front of a structure or maybe to the side. And that was a direction that you gave us previously that we're looking at identifying where those can be located. In the past, we've had some issues with how do we enforce lighting. Sometimes lighting can get bright enough to be a nuisance. And so we're better defining what glare looks like and how that's measured, and we believe that this will be a better tool for the city. Again, accessory dwelling units, how do we track them? Not just the permitting of them, but whether or not they're still in use, and that's why we want to have an annual business license. It's a really nominal fee. It's just the base rate of it's like $50 or $60 is the standard fee for just like a home occupation or a business license. There was some clarification in the auto mall zone that we wanted to correct, just a technical correction. So again, just like last time, you can approve the proposal with or without additional amendments. The one thing that we mentioned in the work meeting is that if you do make a motion to forward this to the city council, we do want to remove all of the references to recreational vehicles, because that is in favor of your next item. Again, they used to be one boxcar bill, but we split them out, expecting that the council may also want to study the RV vehicle portion in greater depth versus some of the other technical corrections that we're proposing. Any questions about 5.1? This is a public hearing, so.
And we are the applicant, so.
Okay.
I do have a comment on double fencing, and it's more so, like in my neighborhood, I have people that sit really high, and then I have people that sit really low. And if someone's building a house here on the top, and then the person below them has a fence already, if the person on the top builds a fence, isn't that kind of double fencing? Like, could we have an exception for those situations where it could create a safety hazard for those that live on the upper lot?
Why didn't you ask this in the work meeting?
I'm so sorry. It just came to me.
I must admit, I have never contemplated or experienced that issue. Is that, Sheldon, when you did code enforcement, did you come across that at all, or through?
I have a really good example for you if we want to look at it.
That fence is just a safety fence.
I literally had that, the house I lived in prior literally had that issue.
Yeah.
So.
I know that typically if a fence line is separated by 10 feet.
Yeah, I was going to say a horizontal.
6 feet, it's not considered to be double fence. Okay. So maybe we could interpret that to be including vertical.
Well, that's interesting.
But typically there would be a horizontal offset as well if you've got some type of slope coming up.
That's
You
true.
will have a horizontal offset too.
Well, they have a retaining wall up to the fence and then fence.
They basically can't put their privacy fence up. They were trying to put it somewhere in so it actually blocks off their animals and stuff like that. Is that what the fence is?
It's not for animals, it's for small children.
They're animals.
Basically.
Well, and again,
If you feel like it would warrant a clarification, but again, it's not an issue I've ever dealt with before.
and there's always, that's the ordinance, somebody could come and get a variance for
That's
any
right.
purpose as well.
I don't know, have you guys seen any issues with that?
So I would just say.
Because there's
that
already an allowance of
The
a
only-
6-foot separation.
The only thing we're doing on double fencing is making it so that if someone won't remove it, this is more for a development, just so I want to make sure. I don't think we're solving the double fencing completely. All we're saying is if a commercial entity comes in and puts a precast wall, they don't have to go tell the neighbors, I'm removing your fence. That's all we're adding. So I would say that might be an issue we want to kick off another day.
Yeah.
But I don't know that
It's not being addressed.
we've
in
thought
this
about it
situation.
enough to think about it. This is more just actually addressing that piece. Because like when you look over where the 7-Eleven was, that was the issue. Some of the landowners are like, well, I don't want your concrete fence, and we require a concrete fence. So
Yeah.
the answer is, you're getting a concrete fence, right? That was really the intent of this.
We could have just proposed eliminating allowing double fences, but it just seemed like, as a community, that's been something we've worked to avoid. And yet we've seen where sometimes we just have not been able to resolve a conflict. And so in this case, we're saying that if a developer can demonstrate to the satisfaction of the community development director that an adjacent property owner just is unwilling to have that fence removed, rather than sacrifice, a masonry or precast fence, we will just allow a double fence to exist in that condition, in that
And
situation.
that's the community development director,
Yeah.
may permit double
Yeah.
fencing.
But
That is-
still, it seems like it's fair to
Yeah,
both parties.
Yep.
Which was been my concern, is it just felt like when you have that unresolved conflict, the ordinance felt inappropriate. So at least we now have a relief valve for that conflict.
Michael, my bigger question was the walls along collector and arterials, the exception there. I've read through it like 9 times, and I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to
Okay.
say.
And maybe
Can you give me a
yeah.
visual?
We've had a few places, it doesn't happen very often, but we have a historic lot that does front onto a street that currently we would typically require a wall. We would require, a precast fence or a wall. But because that lot faces that restricted access street, it doesn't seem appropriate to have a 6-foot wall, in that location. Typically, these walls that are going on to these high-traffic corridors, what's on the other side of the wall is a backyard.
Yeah, we're protecting backyards.
Right, but in some cases, we've had front yards because it's been like a historic lot. It's been a
Gotcha.
lot that existed before maybe the road intensified.
So this would be like along anything like 6400 West, and more we're not trying to waive it for the backyards or side yards.
no,
This
no.
is, I have a
Front
current
yard.
lot front.
Yep,
Okay. A part I was confused on.
yeah. That's all it is.
Great questions. We didn't think about it in the work meeting, so.
Also, did we change the minimum lot area widths when we did the general plan? Is that have we made changes, or is this something new? Because it looks like we're changing it.
No, okay, so those corrections on the lot widths, we had conflicts in the code where we have a setback requirement, a front yard setback requirement, and then typically in most zones, we're saying that you measure the lot width at the setback requirement. But for these zones that were identified in this text amendment, they were different. They were like, one would say 40 and the other would say 50. Like, that doesn't make sense. I mean, obviously, if we're not going to measure at the front lot line, it should be measuring that width at the setback. And so that's all we did, is we just made the adjustment to be consistent with the front yard setback.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that. We will, as mentioned, this is up for a public hearing. Again, this is just for item 5.1. We will have another public hearing for item 5.2 when we discuss more on the recreational vehicles. So at this time, I will open up the public hearing for item 5.1 with these changes that were just discussed. Okay, seeing no comments, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Adam,
Second.
second by Heather, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will close the public hearing at this time. Any more discussion amongst the commission?
I have one more, and it's related to glare. I apologize. I should have asked these. I found my notes, and I didn't think of asking them earlier. So the glare, any artificial light source that creates glare observable within normal range of vision from any public walkway. So my house has 3 light bulbs on it. The glare from those lights are seen in the right-of-way. I don't think we mean that. Like, I can't have light bulbs on my house, right? Everyone's home glare. There is a amount of light that sheds off of your property line, but this is pretty tight, and I was just trying to understand, what are we after with that segment of the safety and nuisance stuff from that glare perspective?
This was an issue that Sheldon had researched and had drafted the text. Do you recall the source on that?
It just seems pretty aggressive for, like, there's no measurement. Like, I'm not seeing a lumens measurement like you would typically do for a commercial, but if someone has just a lot of lights on their house, I don't know how we measure. I'm not one of the code enforcement that would go out there, but I don't know how you're going to be subjective between a typical home that has regular lights and a typical home that has a little bit brighter light. Like, what are we Like,
Yeah, and
that's
we
the part,
do-
I'm trying to visualize what we're
We
going.
do allow for, just decorative lighting. Obviously, you're gonna be able to see the light element in that case.
I was just confused, I was more just trying to see.
And
what
we could
we're-
maybe add, maybe if you were to make a motion to just direct staff to identify like a lumen level or something that is consistent with the industry standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we mean residential, is what, it seems like this is written towards not residential, but that's the part I'm trying to figure out.
It's really addressing both. It really is. And the problem that we were having difficulty enforcing our ordinance was in a residential condition. Right now, in commercial, we are requiring light studies.
Yeah.
And we are getting essentially a zero cutoff at the property line. And that's better on our commercial side. So
And that's where I,
it's more residential.
I'm more just thinking with, the new get your Christmas lights that you don't have to put up all
Right.
year long, right?
No.
Speaking as somebody that's doing that soon, that's what I'm trying to ask is,
So I could add
like,
something.
what do you mean, like, the city streetlight intrudes more into my property than my house lights do. But that's what I'm trying to figure out. What do you mean by whose perspective is nuisance in that? That's what I'm trying to measure.
Sounds like Lauren gave us a great presentation.
I remember this,
On
but
lighting
I don't
and stuff.
remember
Maybe
what
is-
this would be related
Maybe
to.
have some clarification.
Yeah, so my understanding of this is we're trying to just prevent disability glare. So it's at that 6-foot mark. And I agree we need to pick a lumen or even say we don't want to be able to see the light bulb itself. That's the greatest glare that happens. But we can work on defining that more and getting measurable and quantifiable stuff connected to that.
So deflected light seems to be okay. It's the direct from the source to your eyes that you want to.
Yeah, the wording says
shield.
light source.
Yeah, on page 212, item 4, it reads, "No light source shall be visible from beyond any property line."
That was what got my attention when I read that.
That's pretty definitive. No light, period.
No light
So even though you have a house light on your
source.
house,
So
So-
it's a definition of what
Right.
is the source. The
So
bulb?
there's a fixture versus a bulb, so most of the house fixtures, you actually can see the bulb, that we have here. So that would say that all those you can't have those.
correct. That's why.
But it's hooded or deflected.
So are you saying like jellyfish lighting? Is that
So I have two concerns. Jellyfish lighting was one, but if you have the traditional 2 or 3 sconces on the front of your house, right by your garage, like everyone does, and they have a
And
light
you
bulb,
and
and I
you
can
see
see
the
the light bulb, and it bugs my eyes when I'm driving down the road, which it does, like depending on which preference of light bulb you like. This right here, to me, is basically saying you can't have those if the light goes past your sidewalk, which I would argue is in every condition that we have across the entire city. So I'm just trying to say that nuisance light piece seems to be, again, what caught my eye was and I apologize I didn't bring that up, was the true nature of exterior lighting, like for just general residential subdivisions. Because I get the dark sky movement commercial, I get trying to shade that down, pushing it where it should be. But on people's property where they're having just a simple thing like a wedding in their backyard and they turn on their decorative lights.
Yeah, I think we all understand the intention. We all understand the intention. I think it's just the wording that needs to be changed in
It
some
seems pretty
fashion.
aggressive is all I'm trying to say.
The goal is not to have the light source not be visible from the sidewalk. It's to have the light that is coming from that source stop before the sidewalk.
Fair.
That way, you have less of the street lights coming into your home at night, and you have less of lights going into neighbors' homes. So that was the goal with that statement, but
So
wording.
the wording saying no light source shall be visible from beyond any proproperty line
Yeah, I think
is
it's
probably the bigger portion that needs to be removed, right?
It's too adamant.
Maybe we could clarify that with something about no measurable
No, I would say maybe
light
no light
quantity
source.
or something.
I mean, I get you don't want a
Above
big.
2-foot candles or
Yeah.
something. Because if we're below 2-foot candles, that's kind of the general safety
Right.
lighting.
Decorative is okay. In fact, we have as an exception holiday lighting. It's in the next section.
Correct.
So we do have exemptions to that, understanding that there would be decorative.
I mean, I get we're trying
lighting.
not to avoid
Yeah.
the floodlight going onto someone else's
Right.
property, right? Like, that to me makes sense.
So you put
I
put a
think-
light level on it, I think that makes the most sense.
If you can just direct staff to identify or clarify the meaning of glare, what's the language again, Lauren? And I forgot, you're the one who helped with this shortly after you were hired. But we can add that based on industry standards, I'm sure.
I just saying, trying to tie it to something.
Yeah, I like, 4B, where it defines the nuisance lighting, that's okay. So maybe we just let the nuisance statement stand and just remove that sentence that says no light source. That's just too adamant for me.
Well, it also starts to get into talking about combustion, welding, and other sources, which that to me is a total different topic. Like if you're gonna be a welder in your front yard, yeah, that's a big issue. But
Well, and
it kind of, it blends really uniquely there.
I don't think you can completely get rid of that
And a
first sentence of glare, where it says light source shall be arranged, hooded, or otherwise controlled to deflect light
I think he's saying the
away
next.
from the adjoining property. You've got to keep
The
that.
no light.
Yeah,
it's
but
from
then
no
it's the
light
next
piece.
sentence, I think, that
Right.
you're getting at.
It's basically from that last sentence that seems like a catch-all, but it almost catches too much. That's all I'm trying to say.
in reference to
It's no
your,
light source above 2-foot candles shall be visible beyond any property line.
I'm okay with that.
No light source above 2-foot candles.
I don't know what, I've never measured that, so.
and Adam, in reference to your
Normally that's
jellyfish
parking lot
comment,
Yeah.
Okay, that seems reasonable.
in reference to your jellyfish comment, there, in section B, just underneath,
Yeah.
that gives an exemption for
An exception.
holiday lights.
Right.
Yeah, mine was more the two
Jellyfish
different.
tends to stay up year-round, but yeah.
Right.
There's other brands than jellyfish. We gotta be careful here.
I'm using a different.
Permanent lighting, yeah. Yeah,
Permanent holiday lighting.
yeah, permanent holiday lighting.
Okay.
Okay, sounds like we got some direction then. We can put a value to it. And we'll, I think the thought was let's make a value, but then the staff can verify that is appropriate. Maybe that's the motion.
And again,
We
this
just-
is a recommendation to the council.
correct.
So,
And I think it can be addressed with staff. It's just
Yep.
something that I think needs to be just polished a little bit.
And
so.
I would say be careful even with the value, because Joe Public out there, how's he gonna measure the value of the light? He's not gonna be able to do that.
He's gonna take 2 candles and put it at this property edge.
2-foot
It
candle.
normally says on the box that you buy the bulb in.
I more worry about
yeah.
the police force that has to go out and
Oh, here we go.
Right? They're
Oh,
gonna-
you
that
set
was-
him up. Now he's gotta come comment.
That's the
All right,
part
go
to
ahead.
me, because everybody's gonna have their own frustration,
Knew
right?
you were gonna drag me into this one. Okay.
Sorry, Cody.
Everything that's been said is valid. I would say our 2 primary problems from an enforcement standpoint are light direction and nuisance. The reason why this was proposed is because we don't have anything currently in the ordinance to address the nuisance, right? When we get involved from an enforcement standpoint, that's because usually other diplomatic efforts have failed. So we're primarily, in a residential area, we're primarily concerned with the nuisance issue. So rather than splitting hairs on what's 199 lumens versus 201 lumens, from an enforcement standpoint, it's a lot easier for us to say the nuisance language as it's been drafted by Lauren. If my officer on the street feels like whatever is happening constitutes a nuisance, then they go through the administrative process. And if the homeowner disagrees with that, they have remedies to go through, and they have a process they can go through, where we go through the administrative law judge and whatever, they can plead their case. That's really the objective here when we talk about code enforcement in a residential area, is to eliminate or mitigate the impact that that homeowner has on their neighbors, right? So rather than my people having to carry lumen measurement devices and the homeowners having to check and do math, it's a lot simpler, like you were saying, Daryl, if you're concerned about that second sentence, just eliminate it, but give us the tool to address the light direction, because that's the safety hazard piece, and then the nuisance issue, And then we will approach that from an enforcement standpoint, the same as we do everything else in the city, which is education and voluntary compliance first. We help work through the problem, and then if we can't do that, we can move to citation or other types of enforcement that have administrative processes associated with them.
And I'm okay if we actually, I think maybe removing it makes the most sense, because then you don't have to worry about lumens and foot candles, so, cool.
Well, we'll make a motion, sounds like, and,
Sounds good.
yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay, then,
I can make the motion. I'm not sure how to phrase this. I recommend that item 5.1, the consideration for recommendations to the amendments of Title 10 of Harriman City Code be accepted with a second look at the definitions being offered in the outdoor lighting code of 10-29-34, item 4 and beyond.
And removal of any reference to RVs.
And removal of any RV language found in item 5.2,
5.1.
5.1.
5.1.
Okay,
Second.
all right, we have a motion by Darrell, second by Forrest. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Forrest?
Yes.
Darrell?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Adam?
yes.
And Preston?
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you. All right, that it does move forward as a recommendation for approval with those two items. All right, this time we will move on to, let's see, get to my, item 5.2, consideration of a recommendation to amend Title 10 of Harriman City Code to regulate RV storage on private property. Michael?
Clint couldn't decide which one was the worst evil, being here for this discussion or doing a young men's camp out. So apparently chose the camp out.
Camp out. All right.
So this is a text amendment that the commission has rolled up their sleeve and had provided feedback on. But we know this is still a work in progress, and I did want to state for the record that we did receive public hearing comments on this, and that's been shared with the Planning Commission. We discussed some of that in our work meeting tonight. So I'll just go through the general purpose of what we were trying to achieve. It's been expressed that our community values recreation, and clearly we've had a history of having residents who own and enjoy recreational vehicles. Since COVID, we've seen that explode even in our city. So we have more residents who are enjoying recreational vehicles and enjoying the outdoors, which is great. But we have also had a history as the city has developed over the last 3 years or so from a more rural agricultural community into a suburban community. And we have some property owners who are storing quite a few recreational vehicles on their property. And there's been some complaints that perhaps that's even like a de facto business and not particularly allowed or specifically allowed in the zoning ordinance, and then how that impacts property value. So we're trying to figure out how do we allow recreational vehicles to be stored on the property and yet still protect our community, protect neighborhoods and property values. So from our general plan, one of our goals, it says Harriman aims to enhance the public realm throughout the city and create neighborhoods of lasting value and beauty. So we're trying to find codes that help us do that. Under our zoning standards, one of the obligations is that we find ordinances that are in harmony with the character of development in the city and that limits or mitigates adverse effects on adjacent properties. So we have the legal authority to restrict what happens on private property to try and maintain these two objectives of the zoning code. Maintain harmony with existing development and not have adverse effects on neighboring properties. So these are the overall objectives. We're trying to define recreational vehicles. Again, this was an issue that was identified by our code enforcement team, just wanting to have better clarification in our ordinance as to what constitutes an RV. We also historically have talked about RV regulations relative to residential use or residential zone, but as we know, a lot of our agricultural zones have been developed for residential purposes. And so we wanted to clarify that these standards would apply equally in residential zones, agricultural zones, and also this forestry recreational zone, which is another zone that we've seen some residential development within. Not as much, but there are some neighborhoods that have that FR zone. This is an accessory use. It would not be a primary use of a property, so there would have to be some other primary use on the property, a home. We proposed to limit RVs per lot, a maximum of 5, and that was some early direction from the commission, but again, that was a working meeting. There's certainly any obligation for the commission to maintain that standard. That was just a concept that was thrown out there, and staff has tried to respond to that, and then also limiting 2 of the same type. We are requiring screening. Now, clearly, a 6-foot fence or even an 8-foot fence is not going to fully screen a taller, recreational vehicle. This is typical. A lot of cities will say, okay, you need to have your RV vehicle at least behind a fence, a 6-foot fence, in the side yard or rear yard, knowing it's not screening the whole vehicle, but at least it does screen a portion of it or defines maybe where that can be located. We also have seen a number of residents who, in order to provide parking or storage or access for recreational vehicles, they will widen these driveways, sometimes with permits, and then we can tell our residents, okay, this is what the code allows. There's a maximum. You have to be so many feet away from the property line or maybe from a neighboring driveway or a hydrant, but we wanted to clarify and be more specific about, limiting the width of those drive approaches. Also saying that RV needs to be behind at least the front line of the home. We had some discussion about allowing maybe one on the driveway, but right now the draft is saying it still needs to be behind the front line of the home. And something new and was not contemplated when we first started. We initially, as you saw in 5.1, the old draft said that you could not use an RV for any type of occupancy at all. Some cities have allowed the use of an RV temporarily while you're constructing a home. And I've actually, over the years, have really valued that solution. It's an interim solution, and when properly regulated, I think can be a win-win, especially, of course, for the property owner. And then through COVID, we also saw that sometimes these were used temporarily as family come. Anyway, so we are proposing in this draft that there is some ability potentially to occupy an RV temporarily. Also, we talked about how there are some properties that have some pretty severe non-compliance. If this were adopted as proposed, there's a lot of properties that would say, that's not who I am right now. I don't have 5 RVs, I have 10 or 15 or 20. So the idea is that we would have some kind of sunset clause or some kind of transition period proposed to be 1 year. We saw in some of the public comments that maybe that should be shortened to 6 months or 3 months, but we could not have a transition period at all. We adopt a code and we could potentially require it from day 1. But there are some who have been relying on these RV storage as rental, and it's part of their income. And so this was a kind of a compromise recommendation. So again, just a number of details. We're defining what the size of these RV vehicles can be and what they are not. We
Can I
talked
ask
about.
a question?
Yes,
quick?
please.
So
please.
would a bus qualify?
It has to be limited to this square footage.
How big is
Yeah.
a bus?
A bus would not qualify,
It would not qualify.
not a small one. I don't know how long the big ones are. They're probably close to 45.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're probably at least.
Your little shuttle buses are certainly shorter than that, but
I've seen
yeah.
So motorhomes wouldn't be
I didn't ride a short bus.
Included in the RVs.
Once in a while, sir.
Yeah, yeah, so 50 foot, right?
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking the large
Yeah.
motorhomes that are,
I'm not even sure the large ones are 50 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not.
no, I'm just thinking with all
I
the
think this is
bump
probably
outs and
thinking
things
more
that
about
come
some,
out, like,
Oh, for
I
square.
think we probably needed
For square
to
footage.
find it a little smaller.
maybe, yeah. Okay, so location, where they can be placed, and the fact that it would be on some kind of improved pad. It can be gravel, but it has to be defined, right? It can't just be roll it out on your backyard and let the grass die, or have no definition as to where you're saying is your parking pad for that RV vehicle. Again, we were talking about how we're going to try to control or communicate more clearly what is allowed when you're widening a driveway. Sometimes we've seen folks who will widen their driveway and maybe not get a permit to widen the drive approach. And so they end up driving across the sidewalk and the park strip and the curb, which obviously can damage the infrastructure, the public infrastructure. And we don't want that. And we also don't want drive approaches in places that cause conflicts with either other utilities or neighboring property. So we're trying to be more specific in this regulation about that. Again, the screening, 6 foot minimum, solid fence. There are some exceptions that we can consider. This last bullet point is just saying, you know, if you're asking for an exception on screening, we will, the obligation is on the applicant's part to demonstrate that they qualify or should qualify for an exception. You know, just because you ask for it, that's not enough. You've got to demonstrate, you know, there's a basis for that exception. The RV occupancy during construction is certainly, it's not unique, but it's not typical. And we also don't want that to be just an open-ended, you know, opportunity to use that. So we want to make sure we have specific obligations in that kind of exception. And I believe that these were issues that we had previously discussed as a planning commission. So I think this is consistent what we had been given direction on before. No, maybe you missed a meeting.
No, I just have a question
Yeah,
in
sure.
regards to like garbage and trash. Are you able to even get a garbage can if you aren't living there?
That is a good question.
I think that, I was just trying to think back to when I moved here, and I don't know if you can. But I think that would absolutely be necessary.
You could be living there.
Or-
You're
oh,
living there
please.
now. You're just living in a trailer.
Right, but I don't know how the,
You can have construction dumpsters for the construction of the home. So there would be some
okay, that works.
location
I
for
didn't
the
even
trash
think
removal.
about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I had a question on the occupancy. I don't remember, I remember discussing it. I didn't remember coming to any sort of a conclusion of if we wanted to allow a temporary occupancy for visitors of like a week or something. Was that, I know that was discussed, but I don't see it in here.
Right, and if we want to expand this even further, we can certainly do that, if that's the direction of the commission.
I think if we were to allow that, though, then we're going to have issues with people coming every single week, right?
It's a camping spot.
So if we just say no, nobody's going to be calling on grandma that's visiting.
Well,
I
You
think
know.
we leave, I think we leave it here for now. I mean,
Yeah.
remember, we've never had one of these. Let's step it in slowly.
Yeah, we
You
may-
put in so many regulations, I think we can always revisit things, right? We've never had one.
Yeah, this is a first step.
Which is why we have the problem we have, right? I mean, we're trying to address baby step problems. Hey, Mike, I have a question related to the 45 degrees. I saw it right before we headed off the slide. It was like 2 ago. I wanted to make sure which angle are we talking about when we say 45 degrees. So it says, go back one more. That one right there. So there's a little note here that says no less than 45 degrees from the back of sidewalk. So I
So you
assume
want to
the
clarify
driveway.
which, are we talking about the interior or?
that's what I'm trying to
Okay.
figure out. Which angle are we talking about? The one to the
From
driveway, or
the
the driveway to the
Okay.
the driveway to the other side? Just
Grass side or the,
If it's less, it'd be from the sidewalk to the driveway.
That's what I think it is as well, but I
We'll
just want
clarify
to make
that.
sure we have a little dimension there of
Okay.
what we're talking about.
To driveway, yeah.
And that's the intent. We want to make sure that this is usable and
Exactly.
understandable, so, yeah.
I apologize to take us
Nope,
back. I
that's
just saw
good.
that when I was looking at it.
Okay. And another thing to be aware of with this provision is this, a CCNR may not allow this, or an MDA may not allow it. So this is kind of outside of the box thinking, but it certainly would be probably limited in its application.
I think so too.
But it is a pretty cool idea. We've had some people who have asked for this over the years, and we've had to say no.
I think in the cases of that subdivision we had earlier today, right, with the sewer, that might be a total perfect situation, right?
Yeah.
They're working on getting that sewer constructed and
Yeah.
basic subdivision. So.
Okay, so as we talked about, it has a limit on the number and types.
Can I
So-
ask a question?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed the work meeting when we discussed this most recently, but I was wondering, can you tell me more about screening not being required towards the public street if it's shared with the main driveway?
So it is required, but I think there were just some exceptions, right? Let me go back to this. Yeah, so we do require it.
Love it.
And the exception, when access from the same driveway as a primary parking. So, if your driveway, your main driveway leads to that storage area.
Oh,
and then
but
we
it
have
does
a
have
t-
to be
a-
set behind the front of the
Yeah,
house?
right,
Is that was the trade-off?
As long as it's behind the house, you're okay.
Yeah.
But you don't have to put in a gate. If you don't want to put a gate in, you want to put it behind the trailer, that's totally fine. Whatever you want to put your gate, that's up to you.
Okay.
It could. I mean, I think that was the position that we had initially, but I think some of the commission members were suggesting maybe that's not needed.
So Tara, honestly, where that discussion was, it kind of depends on your preference of how you like to back in. Do you like to hide behind a trailer, behind a fence, have your trailer behind a fence or not? Sometimes, in order to have those fences there, they'll have to open out, and it makes it harder to actually physically back your trailer in. So that's why we were trying to give the provision that if it's behind the plane of the front of the house, that's up to you. You can put that gate wherever you want. The intent is it's kind of in line with the house or further back.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just missed the discussion. Thanks.
Yeah. Oops, sorry. And as you know, this is again open for public hearing, and I know that we had.
No, I think that's great thought. We've had a lot of discussion at this time. Maybe we go ahead and open up the public hearing and then hear from the public and then have some additional discussions move forward. And as was mentioned by Michael, we did receive a couple, and maybe your two individuals are here tonight, but from Kathleen Bybee and also from Lorraine. Don't have a last name. So we appreciate those comments. We have received those ahead of time and are aware of those. That being said, you're still more than welcome to come forward after I open up that public comment period, which at this time, I will open the public hearing. Thank you. And just go ahead and state your name for the record, right up here in the microphone so we can all hear you. Thank you very much for being here.
Kathleen Bybee, I live on 7300 West, and it sounds like the city is very well aware of the problems that we have with large numbers of RVs being stored as a rental storage. So, and you've also seen the comments that I submitted online, which would be longer than 3 minutes. So I'll just truncate it and state again what I think are the most important issues here. And one is that a number and type of RVs that would be allowed would actually create an unsightly nuisance if actually put on properties that are especially the smaller ones. For example, 2 Class A motorhomes, 2 large fifth-wheelers, and a toy hauler, which could be either a motorhome or a fifth-wheeler. That's a little unclear from the language here. But they'd be able to rent that space out onto a quarter-acre lot. And if you multiply that across Harriman, you've got really a lot of potential for eyesores everywhere. The primary concern I have, though, is that there's no indication as to who is allowed to store RVs on a particular property. I talked to surrounding cities, and they all told me, no, we don't let them rent anything. And so basically, we would be a magnet for people who want to rent space for their RVs, which would be a big problem. And I have been told in the past that renting space to unrelated parties should be allowed because it's too difficult to prove that RVs in yards do not belong to friends or family. But it seems the solution to that is not opening up parking to anybody from anywhere. The best long-term solution is to limit RV storage to the legal occupants of the property. It may seem a little strict, but I talked to people from Draper, Bluffdale, South Jordan, and the person from South Jordan had actually worked before for Mill Creek, Midvale, Taylorsville, and West Jordan, and all of them had the same statement that they only allow the owner of the property to use the property for RV storage. Anyway, that's it, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments and appreciate you being here. Please come forward.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Greenhall, and if I can get this up, I won't bore you with my story on this one, but and I thank you guys for listening to this. My sister, Kathy was my sister, and she owns a house a few blocks from me, just around the corner, and she's been very generous about letting us use her property for chickens and a garden, things like that. And in the past, and as you well know, in the past while after COVID, it has just blown up, these properties, and I walk around all over, and it's all over the place, as you well know too. But if a large motorhome is 45 feet, so yeah, it's almost a bus size, and I did grow up with my dad who had a bus on the side of our yard, so I get it. It's very large. But if it's a quarter of an acre, it doesn't make any sense to have one that big. So I think maybe per lot size, it should maybe allow for a little bit bigger. Anyway, the thing that I'm concerned about too is we have an amazing law enforcement in our city, and I'm sure that they don't want to be the ones who enforce all of these RVs that can become a hazard and illegal. So let's say people move in with their RVs, and it's not their property, and who's going to regulate what's in them? Who's going to regulate hazardous material? I mean, you can't even go to a storage unit or storage lot without huge regulations, without flammable materials, hazardous, all of these different things that are important to understand. And if people can afford, if you can afford 2 motorhomes, you probably can afford a storage space someplace else instead of in your yard where the neighbors have to look at it. So back to my sister's property, I've watched that as it's just so maddening. Her whole area is lined with motorhomes, and it's just an incredible eyesore. The last thing is that, when it was talking about regulation, I think if people are going to live on their property when they're building a house, I think that's super cool, and I don't think, I think they should be able to hook up to electricity, at least for utilities, but that's about it, if that makes any sense. And thank you for your time, but it's got to change the way it is, so thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Appreciate your time. I don't see anyone else in the auditorium here. No more online comments as well. So I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
You got a motion by Adam?
Second.
Second by Heather. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. We appreciate those comments that have come in. I think a lot of that may be for educational purposes. A lot of the areas, I believe, where you live at, Kathleen, out there, it is an agricultural area, and at this time there is no requirements for any RV, regulations at all in those, and that's what the intent of this is to help with that situation. So we appreciate your comments as well, and I believe that as it's been mentioned, this is kind of a first step. We will be refining it and just trying to get some additional teeth into it. Now we appreciate the situation you're in. I went out and actually looked afterwards at your area and recognize the challenge that you're facing, but we do believe this is going to help that situation as well. So we appreciate your comments tonight. Is there any other discussion then from Planning Commission or any other discussion points that we would like to make?
No, I think in our work meeting, we kind of talked about the number again. I stated that I was uncomfortable with the number, but we're going to do a field trip around the city and really visualize how it's impacting our city, and I think that will help us.
So I agree, I want to do it on the field trip, but I was thinking about this. I don't know that we need to tie it to the lot size, because I believe naturally you'll just do it. I still wonder about the quantity of the same type. So the fact that you could have 2 travel trailers or 2 boats, to me, that's not really the purpose of private property rights. And so I more wonder about just remove that. Maybe in some areas you dial down the 5 to 3. I'm just saying, I don't know. But I believe
Not allow 2 of the same item.
you'd want to make it the same item. More than that. No, I'm saying drop it to 1.
Drop it
You can
to
only
1.
have 1. So
Only
if you
allow
want,
1.
if you want a boat, a ski-doo, a snowmobile, you have all those toys up to 5. I personally, okay.
But they still have to meet the
But
requirement.
I'm saying you don't have 2 travel trailers. You don't have.
So the problem is, though, is when you run into, if you have a toy trailer, where you actually have your toys inside the trailer, and then you have a trailer that also carries toys, they're the same thing, and so you can't have both of those?
I hear you on that one. That's the challenge that I
Right,
don't know
or
how to
boats.
measure that, or ski-doos, right?
Right, ski-doos or boats or
But what
whatever.
I would say is to have 2 boats or 2 motorhomes or 2 travel trailers, those are what travel trailer, bumper pole, or fifth wheel. That's where I do think we should limit to 1. I agree on the utility and toys, that's a little harder.
Right.
And that's why, honestly, that's why we raised it to 5 when we were talking.
Well, if I had 2 teardrops, would that be an issue?
I don't know what teardrop is.
What?
Very small trailer.
Oh, a teardrop, it's a trailer shaped like a tear. It's
I
really-
would say yes.
Gotcha.
I would say yes, because in that instance, it sounds like you're storing. And I believe we need to not be a storage place.
Well, and
I think we need, that's why we tried to do the 5, is we were trying to allow for
options.
Individuals that want to have all those toys, and maybe they want a smaller home and live on a quarter acre and travel a bunch and play with their toys. They can do that.
Maybe I got a different take. I personally think 5 is too high.
Okay.
But I don't know if we're in the business of regulating what the public buys or sells.
Correct.
If they want 2 toy haulers, let them have 2 toy haulers.
And that's where I'm trying
Or
to
2
say.
horse trailers, because horse trailers are regulated as well.
So we
Well, and I have a nice trailer to travel around, but then I got a little one that's not that I take up in the
Right.
mountains.
Maybe I got
Up in the mountains as well.
pontoon to go fishing on and a ski boat to go skiing on.
Right?
I think we need to basically, the issue we're trying to allow is you can do what you want if it's yours, but if it's a rental, not. That's what my opinion is. But we're trying to allow it to be as flexible as possible,
Right.
which makes us increase the number to 5. And I agree, 5 is probably too much in some areas. And even like we talked earlier, outdoor storage, if you're storing it indoors, I really don't go for it. Have as many toys as you want.
You can fit 5 on a quarter acre.
And I apologize. I meant to state that earlier.
Yeah.
That we're talking about the outdoor storage.
Outdoor storage,
Yeah,
anything that's
so-
in a barn or anything like
Yeah,
that that's
if you
fully
have
covered.
Uncovered.
Yeah.
And maybe you
Yeah.
go with 3 or 4, I'm just saying, and that's your limit. I
Well-
do think.
My concern about 3 or 4 is these larger properties, you're talking an acre property, you're limiting it to 3 or 4, and they bought it purposely for horse property, so they've already got a horse trailer. They also have an RV because, when they travel with their horse trailer, they want to travel with their RV too. And then,
They
you
got
got
a
a
boat, and then
flatbed
they
because
got-
you got to carry the hay. You're already
So maybe the
maxing out.
case is on quarter acres and smaller, it's 3, and anything bigger than that, it's a max of 5 or something like that.
And they can
So
always
maybe
come-
that's the line, but I still don't think, I think we still need to have a provision that doesn't allow you to have 2 fifth wheels, 2 travel vacationing RV fifth wheels to prohibit or limit rental
For the
properties.
idea of limiting rental.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's figuring out a way to put language in there to limit rentals of, rental RV storage.
Well, then maybe that should be the language, not the number of RVs or type of RVs, but whether you rent it or not.
Could be the
I
case. I don't think rental's even
That may have
allowed
to
right
be our
now.
approach, not like specifying.
But it's hard to say, you know, oh, I'm keeping these for
Yes.
uncle, cousin, and.
Yes, I didn't say it was easy. I said, but that should be our approach.
But in
I
this,
think there needs to be a limit
I'm
on the
gonna,
number as well.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate on that too, because frankly, if you've got a parking space that is literally designed to hold an RV pad, you just don't own an RV, and then you have a friend that comes to you and says, hey, I need a place to put this. Are you open to taking $50 a month?
you're renting.
I have no problem with that. It's literally designed for that. Why are we going to want to limit that transaction when currently that RV is being stored at the front of somebody's house, and then we pass this ordinance and they're like, no, don't like that. I don't see a problem with having a person renting that space if that's literally the design and appropriate area for it.
There's the shared economy right there.
And there are a lot of regulations, right, as to, you know, the RVs have to be covered, you know, all of those other things that are taking place.
I think we
I'm
finally addressed
okay.
where it goes.
Yeah,
right?
we've
finally
addressed
got that, now it's
Right.
quantity and scale.
Well, and I think, again, my thoughts are, maybe we just leave it alone, because we've gone round and round, and we're doing it again tonight. Round and round, maybe we leave it alone. Individuals can come before us, request a variance. If you want to get rid of maybe the two of the same, maybe that's fine. But again, a quarter acre lot is not going to have 5 RVs on. There's other requirements that are going to prohibit that from ever happening, right? If they can do it. I mean, there's other requirements that it's just not going to happen. That's why we just basically said flat 5, you know, regardless of size of lot, an acre could probably accommodate it, a quarter's not, so you're not going to have it in that situation.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you're not allowed to have a commercial type RV rental anyway. This little, you know, transaction amongst friends is a little bit different, but if you're not going to go out and advertise, hey, I got this lot for RV, I can fit 5 on my acre lot, you know, that's prohibited, I believe,
That's why I
in the
think
city
looking at
right
the
now
field
anyway.
trip, figuring out the quantities, we'll look at some
Yeah.
quarter acres, some bigger lots.
Yeah.
I honestly think our bigger lots are our lesser problem, because most of those are big, they've been there forever, they're kind of, they're.
Yeah.
They've got
And there's
15 RVs
there's
on them.
now, some of them are 15 RVs, but some of them aren't. I think if you really went and looked, they're probably the half acres and third acres is the ones that are the bigger problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I know that earlier we had talked about the possibility of doing a field trip. It sounds like commission still is interested in doing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So assuming that is going to happen in 2 weeks.
Do we want to, yeah, the question is, do we want to continue this item until that field trip?
I don't think we're ready to make that final number on 3-5 size yet.
Agreed.
I think we finally nailed down location, and I think it's good. I think that's the case. Allow staff to maybe just put the clarifying on where you're measuring that angle.
Yeah.
And then that way we're really just talking, are we talking 3 for quarter acres and smaller, 5 for bigger? And then I think we have to figure out a way to address multiples
of the
same type within reason. And again, I mean more the living style, so like the large, big trailers. So you can't have 2 big fifth wheels next to each other and call that good, or 3 of those. So, because a lot of the quarter acres that I'm thinking that are in Rose Creek are about 120 feet deep with a 25-foot offset. You could put several right in a row,
Right in a row to the
up
back.
your back. And so that's what I'm trying to worry about, is that rental property that is an RV. It's just obnoxious. I still think a standard 6-foot fence for the standard type use, and that's what we're trying to allow, is standard logical use of RVs, not what we have right now. So.
Did I hear a motion to continue this
Motion to
item?
continue.
We have a motion by Adam, excuse me, a second by Heather. And again, this is to continue item 5.2 until we can go out and do a field trip. and then it'll come back before us. We will not need to do another hearing, I believe, at that time, or would we?
Yeah, so do you want to close the public hearing?
We have closed the public
Okay,
hearing,
so
technically.
Do you want us
so-
to plan on advertising again? We don't have to by state law, but we can.
I don't think we need to have another public hearing. We appreciate the comments. They did a great job representing, I think, all of Harriman, so. All right, at this time, we do have a motion to continue this particular item. So at this time, we'll go ahead and call for a vote on that motion. Preston?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
And Forrest?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. That item will continue. We'll continue to discuss that. Appreciate that. All right. Any comments from the commission tonight? I appreciate the discussion. Maybe just something a little bit I noticed tonight. Maybe make sure as we're having these discussions, we're not talking over each other. Make sure we're reading, there's a lot of things going on. So just make sure as future meetings, we just kind of take turns and be a little bit more orderly.
I will
that
shut
way.
up, Chair. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying, we were all doing it. I was doing it as well. I'm not calling any particular one out. So I just, for future reference, yeah, for that. All right, thank you. Future meetings, next week will be a city council meeting. 2 weeks from today, we'll have our work session and field trip as a planning commission. We will figure out whether we're going to be doing the regular meeting early or after that field trip. We'll leave that up to Wendy. We can do the regular meeting at 6, and then we will do the work session immediately following that regular meeting on the 5th, is what the plan will be. And then city council meeting on July 12th. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Heather, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I do wonder if doing a tour on July 5th
Oh.
after a holiday is wise, since a lot of people are using their toys and they were